whenever the commercial would come on, he would tell me, the game's not really like that. And I was just thinking, well, what do you mean it's not like that? They're showing a commercial. It has to be like that.
You owe me a pizza.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And today I want to talk about a system that I've been feeling very nostalgic for as of late, and that is the PlayStation 1. Now I've got a little bit of an interesting history with the system, mostly from seeing games, commercials, games like Twisted Metal, games like Crash Bandicoot, which this system just seemed like a very mature system. All the games were very serious. Metal Gear Solid was a very serious game to me. Resident Evil 2, those were all, older teenager games is what I saw them as. Now, the first time I ever played the PlayStation 1 was at Best Buy. A lot of my gaming memories start at Best Buy. And my dad used to take my brothers and I there on the weekends, and we just walk around for an hour or two. My dad used to call it window shopping. We would go to stores and just walk around, never buy anything, but just check things out. And I remember sneaking off to, play the demos that they had set up. And mostly I remember playing Crash Bandicoot, and I also remember playing Ape Escape because that was the game that required the DualShock controller. I remember playing these games and just thinking that the system was a little bit weird. I thought the buttons were weird. The fact that they used shapes instead of letters for buttons, I thought that was a little bit weird. I thought the D-pad was a little bit weird. They didn't have a typical D-pad like the Nintendo controllers. I thought that the two trigger buttons or the two shoulder buttons, that was just weird. I came to think that this system was really just kind of gimmicky. I honestly didn't think it would last. Combined with the fact that they were using CD games, instead of cartridges, I thought this is not a real, video game console. This is more just like an entertainment console. So I was really skeptical about the system, and honestly I didn't think that it would last because I had seen the Sega Saturn, before that, and that really wasn't very successful. The PlayStation was a system that I didn't think was going to last. Now I mentioned that I would actually sneak off to play the PlayStation at Best Buy, and the reason that I said sneak off was because I thought that if my oldest brother saw me playing the game and thinking that it was pretty cool, that he would make fun of me. Now, a little bit about my older brother, he was always making fun of us, and whatever we were into, he would always talk down on it. He would pour a little cold water on it just to put us in check or something like that. And a perfect example, I'll share this because I have video of it, was one year we were opening Christmas presents, and my middle brother actually got a G.I. Joe Destro, and he was so excited, and my oldest brother immediately thought of something that he could do to kind of insult that toy. And what he said was, that's not the real Destro. He doesn't have a gold face.
Let me just look at him. He ain't got a gold face. That's not the real Destro. Yes, it is.
And Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, whenever we open these presents, just to crush my other brother's dreams, which he really didn't. He was still excited about it, but just to do that, that's just, I think that really summarizes what my oldest brother was growing up. Now, one thing that he would always say about the PlayStation was in reference to Resident Evil, and he would say, when you play the game and go from room to room, they show this little animation of a door opening, and he said, the only reason that they show that is because it's actually a loading screen. Now, we all remember the loading screens for, from the PlayStation, and, I think that put a lot of people off. But he would always talk down about that. They can't even, go room to room without showing, a 5-second loading screen. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, wow, yeah, that's kind of dumb. And I took those opinions to be my own. That's just, as the youngest brother, that's something that you would do. You kind of idolize your oldest brother and take their opinions to be, your own. And I remember talking with my friends and, expressing that opinion and saying, it's a slow system. It's not as good as the Nintendo, things like that. Yeah, I was just always really worried that if he saw me, if he, walked up on me when I'm playing this game, that he would just make fun of me and say, why do you like that game? That's so dumb. And one of the games that he did this with was Final Fantasy VII. Now, if you were around at the time, you remember seeing the commercials on TV. They were so epic. And one thing about the commercials is that they didn't really show any gameplay. And I didn't know that. And whenever the commercial would come on, he would tell me, the game's not really like that. And even as excited as I was, he would just, like I said, put my fire out with that. The game's not really like that. And I was just thinking, well, what do you mean it's not like that? They're showing a commercial, it has to be like that. And, you know, I thought this game was, you know, some amazing next generation computer graphics, all the, you know, cutscenes were just amazing. And I thought that that's what you were playing. The in-game graphics looked like those cutscenes. So I always wondered, what is Final Fantasy VII really like? And I ended up coming to the conclusion that the game is actually like a point and click game. Like the game Myst. I don't know if you remember that game. It's a point and click game that was on the PC. And it's just a point and click game. You navigate through the levels or the, you know, the areas by just clicking, you know, forward, left, right. There's might be some puzzles on the screen, but it's not like a typical game where you have a character and you are, you know, navigating through the world, you know, in a typical game. So I was at Best Buy. Again, we were at Best Buy a lot as kids, and I was at Best Buy looking through the strategy guides, as I always did, even for games that I didn't have. And I picked up the Final Fantasy VII strategy guide, and I looked through it. And what I saw was just a bunch of still images. I didn't see, you know, 3D renderings of dungeons. All I saw was just images of, you know, kind of landscapes with these little labels on the pictures saying, you know, this item is here, this item is here, here's an exit. And from seeing that, all I thought was, this is a point and click game. You see this image, you point on there, there's no characters on those images. It's just the backgrounds. So that's what I settled on. It's a point and click game. And funny enough, when I played my first PlayStation Final Fantasy game, which was Final Fantasy VIII, it kind of confirmed my theory that this was, you know, not a normal game, because when I was playing it, you just talk to a lot of people for, you know, for the first little bit. And I just thought that this game was a game that you progress, kind of like a visual novel or something. Like, you just talk to people and progress the story that way. There's no major battling, because I hadn't, you know, before I got to any battles, you just talk to people and progress through the story that way. And I just thought it was so weird. That's kind of how I first conceptualized RPGs at that time. Now, speaking of RPGs, I had started to play some Super Nintendo RPGs, and one of the first games that I played was Chrono Trigger. And looking through, again, you know, Best Buy, going back to Best Buy and their newspaper ads, I remember seeing a game called Chrono Cross, and I, you know, realized, oh, this must be the sequel to Chrono Trigger. And I thought, man, this is the game that I have to have, because Chrono Trigger is a great game. Chrono Cross is a game that I need to get the PlayStation for. And so something that I found out about was a program called Bleem. And this was basically some software that you could use for emulating the PlayStation on your PC. And, you know, whether my computer could or could not have handled that type of emulation at the time, I was kind of determined to get this software. So I tried downloading it, as we did in the late 90s, early 2000 from, I was using Kazaa to download those, and probably did a lot of damage to my computer by doing that. And obviously, you know, it never worked. It always got to this screen where, you know, you had to enter a product key or a registration key, so I couldn't get past that. And I ended up talking to a girl at school who, her brother actually had the Bleem software, and I said, wow, can I borrow the CD and install it on my computer? And she says, oh yeah, you know, brings it to school a couple days later, and I inserted it into my computer, installed it, but again, you get to this screen where you have to enter a registration key or a product key. So, you know, I did what I could to try to find a crack for the program, or, you know, download a key. Again, downloading who knows what onto my computer at the time. And I did not have any luck. So Chrono Cross was not going to be happening for me. So how did I end up playing the PlayStation for the first time? Well, I built up the courage to ask to rent the system. And it was about $40 to rent that, you know, that giant plastic suitcase from, I believe it was Family Video that we rented it from the first time. And you had to put a credit card down, which was like, you had to put a $250 deposit just in case anything, you know, happened to the system while you had it. And my mom was not excited about that because, you know, you had to put a credit card down, and she was skeptical of credit cards, and that's just, you know, how I grew up. So the system came with one controller and 2 games I think you could get with it when you rented it. And the 2 games that I wanted to get with it was, number 1, Spawn, which was one of my other brothers was into the comic at the time, and the Spawn movie had just came out. And the other game was WCW Nitro. You know, wrestling was huge at that time, and I wanted to rent that because I saw some screenshots in a magazine, and I just thought that it was so realistic. Like, this is going to be the most realistic wrestling experience that you could have. And way better than the Nintendo 64 wrestling games that were out at the time, because the graphics were so blocky, the animations were, you know, kind of robotic, and the WCW Nitro animations were just so realistic, or at least it looked like it from the screenshots that I saw. And what I ended up doing when I rented the game was, you know, when you go to that character select screen, you can see a rant. There's a little option to see a rant or a video by them where they're saying their signature wrestling lines and you know, a taunt type thing. And I just remember watching every single one of them over and over and over, you know, my favorite wrestlers at the time. And I just thought that that was so cool. I might have even hooked it up to my VCR and recorded some of them because that's what we did at the time.
If you want to wrestle an inch more Ric Flair, you got to be able to walk that aisle and style and profile. Woo!
So I was just so in awe of that, and you know, just trying to learn all of the signature moves and just do them just to watch them. So one thing about renting the system was it didn't come with a memory card, and I didn't really know about memory cards at the time, that you needed it to save your game on a PlayStation. So that was kind of, you know, a bummer. I just thought it was like the Nintendo where you could save your game onto the cartridge. So I wasn't able to ever make any major progress on any games, so renting games kind of became not very fun when you realize that. I probably rented it about 4 or 5 times before I stopped. We got games like Mega Man Legends, and I think I rented WCW Nitro, and they had a sequel, WCW Thunder, that I rented a few times too. So did I ever get a PlayStation for myself? I did, in a roundabout way. The girl that I borrowed the Bleem CD from, her brother and my brother were friends. And I knew that he was into anime and video games because sometimes he would give my brother like an anime movie and he would bring it home, you know, just trying to get him into the, you know, into anime. And one day my brother came home with a PlayStation, and, you know, that guy must have gotten a PlayStation 2 because it was around that time, but my brother brought home a whole PlayStation. He said, hey, he just gave this to me. He wants me to try it out. And he also gave him Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, and Street Fighter Alpha. And my brother really wasn't into video games. We played Street Fighter a couple times on that, but he just wasn't really into the games. So in a way it became mine. I was the one who took it over. So I ended up playing the Final Fantasy games, you know, a couple hours each. But the big game that I was excited about was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, because at this time I was getting really into skateboarding, and I saw this game as, you know, there's a lot of huge improvements from the first game to the second game, and I was just so excited about it. And it was so realistic at the time, and I would just play it over and over and over, hundreds of hours. It's definitely my most played PlayStation game, because when I was learning to skateboard, you know, you would play the video game to practice what you're going to do in real life. You play the game to see, oh, you know, can I do this trick into this grind, and how exactly do I do it? You're learning different combos that you're going to try in real life. Now, I wasn't that good at that time because I was just learning, but like I said, it's kind of like a real life training grounds for skateboarding. So what are my opinions on the system as a whole? Like I said, I'm very nostalgic for the system right now. I'm very jealous in a way. I am very jealous for the people who had a PlayStation at the time when all of those huge games were coming out, because when I hear stories of people that are my age now reflecting on the PlayStation, they're talking about games like, you know, the Final Fantasy games, 7 through 9, Tactics. They're talking about Xenogears. They're talking about Lunar. They're talking about Vagrant Story. All those games that seem to, you know, have an amazing epic story that all these people were affected really heavily by, and in a way they've kind of shaped their personality in a way. And, you know, Nintendo 64 had good games. It had good games. Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye. You know, those were memorable games, and I have my own memories with those, but they didn't in a way shape me to be a certain type of person. They were just fun. They were, you know, multiplayer, GoldenEye, Mario Kart. Those were great memories I had with friends playing those. but you know, the epic stories, the powerful characters and the powerful stories, Nintendo 64, you know, really didn't have those games on the system. So I feel like I missed out in a way, but there are so many games that I've gone back to play recently. Final Fantasy VII is a game that I just finished playing in the last 5 years or so. Final Fantasy VIII, on the day that I'm recording this, I just finished it yesterday, which is kind of funny. Grandia is a game that I've gone back and played. You know, all these remasters, I feel really lucky that they're bringing them back out, because it really was, you know, a golden age for JRPGs. There's something that those PlayStation RPGs had that, you know, it's just so hard to recreate. So, like I said, I'm a little bit jealous that I didn't have that experience. And honestly, it goes back to, you know, that shame that I had, that embarrassment that I had from my older brother making fun of the system so often. And I was just so scared to, you know, go for it. Anyways, those are my memories of the PlayStation 1. What was your first experiences with the system? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video.